Well, a pincer movement is two forward movements of troops or tanks or something that form a pincer around the defenders. And what's happened here is that because of the movements they've had, there's one pincer in the south, east of Odessa, one to north near Chernobyl. And kind of from the north to the south, the Ukrainians are surrounded. They can get out either side, but a tremendous force is hitting them on both sides. And it's not hitting them yet, but it's certainly positioned to do so. And 2,000 tanks will do it. That pincer is headed to draw a line to the west, cutting off the Ukrainians from any further contact with the western part, to cut them off in the east, and then slowly grind them into the dirt when they're trapped between the two forces. Well, it wasn't clear during those announcements what they were attacking. And many people thought they were attacking in Donbass in the east and various other places. It wasn't so much a secret, it seems to me, as something sitting there that nobody noticed, which is that the Russians had created a massive southern front, a massive northern front, and the two fronts could crash the enemy. So it was a fairly good move. Yes, it was the masquerade, as the Russians called it. But in this case, it was a masquerade that was in plain sight. It was all done.
A large mobile force moving from one side and from the other. To your understanding, George, has that now been organized? Do we see it? Can we see it, or are they hiding?
Well, it's starting to move, because in order to make this strategy work, you've got to blast into the center of the enemy, the compounded enemy, the cauldron, and destroy the defenders. So the next move of this, having surrounded them where they couldn't move, is hit them directly. There are many ways this can go wrong, by the way. This is no perfect act, but it has put the situation very clearly. Can the Ukrainians fight off the Russians with the available troops, or are additional troops going to have to be sent? And from where?
Right now, the president of Ukraine, Mr. Zelensky, has been in London, he's been in Paris, asking for more ammo, more ammo. They've also been talking about warplanes, but we do not believe they're anywhere close to being delivered. He also wants more main battle tanks, I presume. Does he have what he needs to fend off the pincer, or is he outgunned, George?
Well, one of it's going to depend on the quality of his commanders. He has a lot of force inside that cauldron. They should be able to punch out at critical points. So now, how good is their intelligence as to the weak points of the Russians? How good is their ability to organize large-scale movements? These are all things that are unknown. They have been fighting a battle up till now with dispersed forces who has not had a heavy central control. This one is a conventional battle, as conventional as they can get. And what we don't know about them is not so much the equipment, it's the command structure.
Heretofore, they've been dealing with the front line, what appeared to be stalemated front line, especially at this small village of Bakhmut. And the fighting has been very close at hand, difficult to judge afterwards. Those Ukrainian soldiers there are way advanced toward the east. In other words, they would have a difficult time getting out of the pincer's launch. As Ukraine, the logistics to reposition the army that they've got way to the east to pull back, I mean, I'm trying to imagine what this is going to look like. Are we talking about weeks that they'll have to get out of the cauldron, or days?
The Ukrainians, after fighting very intelligently at the beginning of the war, trying to destroy the Russian military, got into a habit of fighting for cities. Now, cities are fine, but they don't win the wars. And it's almost as they were drawn east, as if the farther east they were, the more powerful they were. And they didn't really consider the worst-case scenarios of the Russians. Now, I would assume that NATO and the United States, the high command there, would have noticed this clearly and would have been warning them. So I don't know what happened, because it's hard to imagine that the Americans didn't tell them. On the other hand, they have been so obsessed with equipment, with send me more, that the training and organizing of large-scale operations went by the boards. But maybe not. Maybe they have something up their sleeves. Maybe they'll turn this into a victory for themselves.
Is the news from the Black Sea Basin, that Moldova's government has collapsed after the landing of a Russian missile that may or may not have been fired at Moldova. Maybe it was fired at Odessa and overshot. Is that significant for the Russian plans that the Moldovan government, which was pro-NATO, is no more?
It's a little fast to say it's no more. It's like many governments reorganizing, but saying, okay, we're no longer the government, different prime minister. But Moldova is dominated by Romania, which is right next door. And the Romanians take a very careful view of that because this is very sensitive to them. So the fact that a missile flew by was, well, that's life. It's nothing to cause anything to fall. But the Russians would like Moldova very much because if you look at the map, it's a further point in the development that would not only threaten Ukrainian placements, but potentially threaten Romania, which is, after all, a NATO member and a very close ally of the United States.
Yes, and we have troops there now. The French have troops there now. There are more said to be heading in. In your presentation, why bypass Odessa? Is it a fortress?
Because the Russians have learned not to fight in cities if they don't have to. In the city, the defender has an advantage. He knows the city. He knows where he'd set up ambushes. He knows how to fight his home turf. The attacker is in new area, doesn't really know what it is, and he gets ground up. So if your plan is to crush the Ukrainian army, battling it out in the city is not going to get that to you. And I think that's the key. This is a different war now.
So the Pincer movement from the north is going to bypass Kiev and head for deeper into the west. The city you identify as Stomir. And the Pincer from the south, from behind Kherson, is going to drive for Vinnytsia. They're driving for cities, but they're not driving through cities. Is that your expectation?
I use the cities because there's a mark to look at. What they're doing is trying to enclose the Ukrainian army in this cauldron and then attack from the outside. The cities are things to avoid. They're good markers on a map, and we should use them because that's about where they're going. But the battle here is to enclose and crush. And if they can do that, they're going to be in pretty good shape.
And you said that the Ukrainians, they keep announcing this is coming, so somebody's thinking through this. Have an opportunity to punch through the cauldron and break it up? Is that how they'd fight?
Well, they've been saying there's going to be a big battle. I don't think they planned this battle because their forces were out of position. They should have tried to block this cauldron from forming long ago. They didn't. They were busy taking cities, and the cauldron formed. So I think some of them knew that, but this did not alarm them as it should have.